Welcome to Hometown Happenings. I'm Carol McCarthy here today with the Detroit Lakes Police Chief Keena, who is retiring from law enforcement, retiring as Chief of Police here after 15 years in Detroit Lakes and 30 years in law enforcement. And Chief, let's talk a little bit about some of your career as a law enforcement officer. How did you get into law enforcement, number one?
Well, when I was a young boy, a lot of my dad's friends were Border Patrol agents. Mm-hmm. And I kind of admired those guys and the authority they projected and stuff. And so fresh out of high school, I went through college for 2 years in Fergus Falls and then 2 years in Moorhead State University at that time, and got a degree in criminal justice and decided to go through police academy. Okay. And got interested in law enforcement from some of the guys that were cops in my hometown that let me ride along with them, and encouragement from my dad, and so that was the start of it.
Right. And where was your first job as an officer?
Well, of course, in college I worked as a security guard and did all that stuff that you kind of do, paying your dues, and I interned at the Fargo Police Department, but my first paying job was in Kindred, North Dakota, a little town of about 500 people, just southwest of Fargo, about 20 minutes. So I was the police chief and the dog catcher and the ambulance driver, and when it flooded, I filled the pumps at night to keep them running to pump the water out of town.
So how many hours a day did you work just in the beginning years?
Oh, you know, down there it was probably 10 hours a day just because I loved it so much. My next job was in St. Cloud, Minnesota, pretty good sized department, completely different environment, urban versus rural. And a lot of hours down there as I climbed through the ranks, and spent a lot of time at home on the kitchen table studying and devising schedules and stuff like that, and moved through some different assignments down there. And when the opportunity came to become a police chief back in my home territory, close to my parents and my wife's parents, I took it, and that was 15 years ago. So time travels.
All right. Detroit Lakes Police Chief Keena, my guest today on TV3. He's set to retire July 15th here, 2011. Now it's exactly 15 years after you came to Detroit Lakes. And
15 years to the day. It just seemed like a good time. I'm of the age where I can collect a retirement pension, and still young enough to kind of write the next chapter in my life and try something different. And provide an opportunity for some change within the department and somebody else to move up the ladder.
All right. So through the years of law enforcement, there have been, I would say, lots of changes with, as any business maybe, through technology and that sort of thing. But what would you say the biggest change in law enforcement since you first started is? Well,
when I started in law enforcement, it was a male-dominated industry, and it was dominated by big males. A lot of guys were hired for their size. You know, it was just believed that a cop should be a big guy that could fill a doorway, and there's been a lot of change in that field now. There are a lot of women in law enforcement. You know, a lot of the old size restrictions and height requirements and vision restrictions and stuff have been lifted, and that stuff has kind of fallen by the wayside. So it's been kind of fun. It's not just simply a male-dominated profession anymore, and the emphasis has changed from being big and wrestling people and being a rough and tumble guy to emphasizing other skills now.
All right. Detroit Lakes Police Chief Keena, my guest today on Hometown Happenings, and we're going to take a break and talk more about his law enforcement career as he gets set to retire July 15th, coming up next on Hometown Happenings. Welcome back to Hometown Happenings. I'm Carol McCarthy here with Detroit Lakes Police Chief Keena. Chief Keena is set to retire here this year after 15 years here in Detroit Lakes, 30 years in law enforcement. And Chief, where are you from originally?
Well, that's a good question, Carol. I was originally born in the state of Hawaii, and most of my life has been spent growing up and down the Red River Valley, all the way from the Canadian border as far south as Barnesville, where I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And after Barnesville, then it's been kind of college. Fergus Falls for a couple of years, Moorhead for a couple of years. A large part of my young life was spent in St. Cloud and then Detroit Lakes, and so I guess we'd have to say we call this Fargo, Moorhead, Barnesville, Detroit Lakes, southern end of the valley home.
Okay, but you didn't take up surfing when you were in Hawaii?
No, I was a little young for it, but I did take up girl watching, and so I think
that's where it comes
I think
from.
it started early, yeah.
Detroit Lakes Police Chief Keena, my guest today on Hometown Happenings. Chief Keena is retiring from his law enforcement career, retiring as Chief of Police here after 15 years in Detroit Lakes. And Chief, what's next for you in your retirement years?
Well, I'm not really sure what's next, Carol. I'd like to try something different. Something a little less demanding and a little bit less than full-time, something maybe 30 hours a week. Flexible, whether it's driving a Medivan and taking people around to their doctor's appointments, or
hosting a TV3 show.
Hosting a TV3 show, cooking, you know, who knows. I love to cook. If I thought I had the wherewithal, I'd ideally go back to chef school and be a chef, but I know that's hard work.
Oh, but you know, you've got so much life in you.
It's fun. It's fun. I love to cook and I love to taste different stuff, but there's a lot of work in putting
What's
out a
your
good
favorite
meal.
thing to hunt?
You know, I would have to say I spent a lot of years chasing waterfowl all the way up into Saskatchewan. I've always enjoyed waterfowling. I enjoy upland game hunting, especially grouse. I've always enjoyed hunting anything where employing a dog is involved, because it brings you a great deal of satisfaction to see a dog work and to do its job.
All right. Detroit Lakes Police Chief Keena, my guest today on Hometown Happenings. I know you're kind of a great white fisherman too, aren't you?
Yeah, I enjoy some fishing, winter time and summertime. I keep a boat on the Lake of the Woods, and as so many other things in my life, it isn't catching the fish myself that brings me the satisfaction. It's seeing somebody else catch the fish and taking them out and having them experience just a phenomenal fishing outing, where you're just catching fish one after the other. And my wife caught a 29.5-inch walleye here a couple of years ago that I had a replica mount made of, and that's brought me a great deal of satisfaction. And getting my kids and anybody else that doesn't really get the opportunity to do that as much as I do, getting them up there and seeing them be successful, that's what turns my crank.
All right. Detroit Lakes Police Chief Keena set to retire here this year, 2011, on July 15th, after 15 years as Detroit Lakes Police Chief. And Chief, want to thank you for your great service here to the community, and you know, being a guest on Hometown Happenings and KDLM Hodgepodge. And you know, you do have a future in radio, young man,
well,
and TV.
Who knows? Who knows?
All right, that's the question. All right, for Hometown Happenings, Chief Keena, Carol McCarthy on TV3.